knowing what I'm really up against. Okay, all right. So today, actually, I chose this sutta called Abhaya Sutta. So I'm not sure whether you all know what this sutta is about. Are you familiar with this one? Yeah? No? Yes? Some yes, some no lah, huh? Okay. Now, for this particular sutta, I have to say that it's not something that all of us are aware of because it's not one of those really super popular one. Every time you mention the name, everybody, oh yeah. So even for me, I would say that this is not something that I'm really so familiar with as a sutta. Yeah, but in looking through the sutta itself, there are certain things that resonate with me. And also, in looking through the sutta itself, I also found something very interesting. Okay, just to run through quickly, not waste too much time here. You all know that in the Buddhist suttas itself, most of the suttas came about, the Buddha didn't just suddenly one morning gets up and then walk to everybody and say, okay, I'm going to teach you this, like a class, I got a lecture planned for you. No, it's never been like that, right? Very often it is situational, then somebody will approach the Buddha with a question, or somebody will go up to him to challenge him, and somehow or other in history, in the historical period of time, during that time, it is actually very interesting that there were a lot of very famous characters at that point in time. Not just in India alone, but also around the world, all right? Around that period of 500 over BC, plus minus a little bit, yeah? When the Buddha Buddha lived his life, right? If you look historically, that whole period in the world, a lot of philosophers, a lot of interesting religious leaders. Why it happened, I don't know. Why this clustering, I don't know. But for a Buddhist standpoint, maybe they shared some past life. Maybe they're a group of friends somewhere, but they all happen to be reborn, scattered around the world around the same time. Okay, I don't know. But this sutta actually came about because of this prince who went to another religious teacher. All right, this religious teacher called Nigata Nanaputta. Okay, now this name doesn't ring a bell with most of us. But if you go through the Buddhist text, you'll find that this name is mentioned in other texts also. Off and on is being mentioned. So I was curious. I said, who on earth is this person? Because I've seen this name before somewhere, but who is he? The sutta mentions it as if he is a known person, that the prince approaches, and then something starts from there. So in digging a little bit into who he is, I realized that he was actually the Jain teacher. Jainism, right? Right? In India, there's a few major religions of that day. Okay, of course, today, Islam is quite a big force there, but in those days, of course, far before Islam. So Hinduism is one of them. Buddhism was just starting, right? Jainism probably preceded Buddhism. All right, so Jainism had this very famous teacher called Mahavira, okay? And this was his other name. He's supposed to be a senior to the Buddha in terms of age. In other words, he started his teaching and all that before the Buddha. Okay? So he was the so-called competing teacher of the day. All right? It seems that from a lot of suttas, you will notice that the people who are interested in spiritual practice tend to go and shop around. Not very different from people today who are seekers, who will go and try all sorts of religions, all sorts of funny new age things, right? Same. So those days, people who are interested, they'll go and hunt teachers down one by one. Actually, the Buddha, when he was younger, before his enlightenment, as Gautama, he also went hunting around, right? Went to various teachers and all that to try. So this prince went to this teacher, Nigata Nataputta, and he wanted to ask a question. He went there to talk to him, and as usual, they're very respectful, even though they are like prince and kings, all right? So basically, he asked how to refute the words of Gautama, right? Or rather, the teacher told him a technique to refute the words of Gautama, because obviously Gautama, Buddha, was known to be a very good and powerful teacher that you almost cannot win an argument with, all right? But to be fair, there are times in the Buddhist text you realize that the Buddha also said, I give up. This one, I have no point arguing. The fellow, if I say it's black, the fellow want to say it's white, no point arguing. I have a point, because it's no longer beneficial. So he also sometimes say, okay, enough. But for some strange reason, they want to go and challenge him and make it difficult for him. All right? So they say, come on, prince, go to Gautama, the contemplative, and on arrival say this, Lord, would the Tathagata say words that are unendearing, disagreeable to others? If Gautama, the contemplative, thus answers, the Tathagata would say words that are unendearing and disagreeable to others. You should say, then how is there any difference between you? Let's see, my eyesight is not. What's the difference between you and the run-of-the-mill people? For even the run-of-the-mill people say words that are unendearing and disagreeable to others. But if the contemplative says that, he does not say such a word, right? Then you go and dig up something that he has said before that is unagreeable and disagreeable, right? And unendearing. And then you throw it back at him so that he cannot, then you make him swallow his own words, basically, right? So this is really an outright offensive attempt to go and basically make somebody look bad, right? Okay? And the example, he says that, then you should say that, how come, Buddha, if you say that he doesn't speak anything unendearing and disagreeable, why do you say that Devadatta, due to his bad karma, is going to end up in hell, blah, 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 all the bad things that's going to happen to Devadatta, because it's obviously unendearing, right? Very disagreeable even to all of us, how it sounds like, right? Okay? You see, and the analogy is very interesting, just as if a two-horned chestnut was stuck in the throat. I don't know whether you all have ever seen a two-horned chestnut. Okay, it's rarely seen nowadays. I think if you all, I don't know whether how many of you all in traditional sort of thing used to, your families and may used to have the Mooncake Festival, they worship the moon last time. They have this black color thing, right? That's like a horn, two horns. It looks almost unreal. The whole thing looks almost unreal. You break, the inside is white color, can eat, right? That's the two-horned chestnut. I never knew what that was called. So when I went to Sutta, I went to check that, and suddenly just hit me, Then I went to check, and I took the photograph. Oh, so now this is what it's called, okay, with a biological name attached from the internet source. Okay, so now you know what that is. So the analogy is quite interesting, So it's like it's almost like having a fish hook, right? You put in a fish hook, you push this way also cannot, you pull that way also cannot, right? All right. So usually you have to cut the hook, correct? So that's the analogy they use. So it's unable to swallow or spit it out if the thing is stuck in your throat. All right? So basically, the whole thing is trying to say that he was trying to corner the Buddha into being inconsistent. On one hand, you say, you don't talk things that doesn't sound nice, doesn't please people. But on the other hand, you said something like that, right? Okay, so that was the trap that was meant to be set on the Buddha. All right? Why this happened? Of course, you have to understand the historical context. There was obvious rivalry at that time between the teachers. So some of the teachers will go and send their disciples to challenge the Buddha. And this is quite frequent in all the suttas. You will see it actually quite frequently. All right? But interestingly, you never see the Buddha send his disciples go and challenge people. Yeah? I don't remember any sutta. If you do, please highlight it to us, because it will be a good one to look at why and what the circumstances are. Okay? But the Buddha somehow or other is usually he's very smart, so he always gets out of it somehow. Okay? Yeah? So after that, after this instruction was given, the prince went away, and then he went to see the Buddha. All right? So the prince is like, more or less like, basically a pawn in this little game here. So he went to see the Buddha, then he saw the Buddha, then he said, okay, today not ready, I'll bring the Buddha to my place there, I give him alms, give him anything. But I think the prince's intentions were not bad, right? His intentions were actually quite good. He wanted to learn something, So a teacher told him something like that, so he go and test ground, Just want to test ground. And to them, maybe I'm not sure whether it's part of the culture then, to test how well the teacher is able to deal with a question, and whether does that reflect the quality of the teacher. I suspect it does. Because in those days, it's like a debate thing. You go and debate. You win the debate, you are a better teacher, so you get more disciples, that kind of thing. And like even today, right, teachers of various religions, it's exactly the same. The more disciples they get, it means the more support they have for their cause, right? right? Whether it is in those days, I suppose, having a place to stay, having support, food, and things like that is a big deal, right? Life wasn't simple and easy then. Okay, so after all that has been done, and he met the Buddha, and the prince said, okay, threw him the question, and the Buddha said, now he's in for a surprise, because he thought the Buddha would just give a yes/no answer. Okay, but the Buddha said, Prince, there is no categorical yes or no answer to that. Okay, all right. So then he already a bit stunned now, right? Because he was expecting that he will fall into the trap and say, no, I always say good things only. I never say anything that sounds bad, right? So now he got stuck already. But then the Buddha usually doesn't end at that, because saying that may have gotten him out of the fix, but has not taught the person anything, that is correct or something that is beneficial to him, right? So he went on to elaborate, and he went on to make examples of situations where, where sometimes it may be disagreeable but still possible to say, yeah? So he says that, to summarize, because the rest of it is the usual typical Buddhist thing, all right, I'll just read to you. Okay, in the first case, the Buddha said this: if the Tathagata knows it to be unfactual, untrue, unbeneficial, yeah, that means not connected to the goal of enlightenment, unendearing and disagreeable to others, he does not say them. So in other words, from this, what he's trying to say, that for all of us, if you know something is untrue, and it's not going to benefit anybody, and if it's going to sound bad, very simple, just don't say it. Right? Okay, so very clear cut. This one, no questions. None of us will even think about any issues of this. Okay, so if you say it, means that you're obviously not out to benefit somebody, right? Now, in a case where the Tathagata knows it to be factual, true, unbeneficial, unendearing, and disagreeable, he also does not say them. Okay, that means you know that this, for example, okay, I can give you an example. There's some news that may be true. Like, for example, there's some sort of racial hate crime that has happened. So that's true, right? It's factual. In other words, you were on the ground, you saw it happen. But you know that this is not going to be beneficial, because if you were to pass the news, this news may actually incite misunderstanding and cause more violence, right? So it's unbeneficial. But when you say it, you may also say it in a way that may sound unendearing. That means you're comparing one against the other and sort of labeling one as bad and one as good, right? And it doesn't benefit anybody by passing this news along, right? So in this type of situation, the Buddha said, don't say it. No point saying it, all right? Now, in the third scenario, factual, true, beneficial, but unendearing, disagreeable to others. In other words, the thing is true, all right? That means not just in what you heard or what you see, but it's, in fact, it's true, okay? And if you were to say it, it is actually beneficial, but doesn't sound good. Sometimes good advice doesn't sound good. It doesn't make other people happy, right? In other words, the person may get upset with you or whatever. You say that, in this situation, there is a proper time, sense of proper time. So even good advice have to be given at a proper time and place. So if you think that the person is not receptive, or you think that the way you put it across is not going to incite a response that is beneficial to the person, then you don't say it at that time. But maybe 3 days later, when things have calmed down, when the situation is more positive, and you say exactly the same thing, right? The effect may be totally different. We all know that, right? When somebody's angry, you try to tell the fellow something beneficial, it doesn't work, right? But you wait a few hours later, the fellow cool down, things become a bit more sensible, then you tell them exactly the same thing, suddenly, it makes sense, all right? So there's a time and place for good advice, right? Even if it sounds not so pleasant, okay? Not so agreeable. Now, fourth scenario, if it's unfactual, untrue, unbeneficial, but yet endearing, all right, and agreeable to others, do not say them, okay? He does not say them. Okay, so even if something is it sounds good, right? But it's not true. And it's definitely not going to benefit the person. You do not say it. Now, examples of this is like, for example, people like this, like, unfortunately, right? They go to, all these sweet talkers, some fortune tellers and all that, right? They tell you what you want to hear, not based on fact, They have no concern for your benefit, and it's sometimes the advice are really not beneficial. They themselves know no better, or they know better, but they still do it anyway, because it sounds good, right? It's endearing. They become popular to you. They say, oh, your face looks very good, You're very lucky one, You see, you got one extra mole down there, This signifies blah, 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 Right? So it's very endearing to you, right? It's very nice, It's very agreeable, of course, You have long life, everything this very good, we'll strike lottery tomorrow, Yeah, but it's not factual. It's not beneficial. Okay? So, not supposed to say. He does not say such things either. Okay, now the fifth scenario. Say factual, true, unbeneficial, but endearing and agreeable. So something can be true, right? In fact, but it's not beneficial to the person. It doesn't help the person in any way. And even if it sounds nice, do not say it. Or he says he does not say it. Okay, now this one example is like, for example, okay, for example, say you look at a person in front of you, and you know that this person, say, is already very concerned about material things, and it's always so nicely adorned all the time, right? And so it's factually true. The person looks good, right? The person is well-to-do, right? And you can say all these things, and it sounds nice. It's agreeable to the person, but does it benefit the person? And if you were to say it like, oh yeah, it's so nice, it's so good, why you got so much money that you can look so good, you can keep yourself so well, blah 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 blah. It may not be beneficial because you may be encouraging them to chase a false dream of permanence, of this transient beauty, of this transient materialism, right? So it's unbeneficial. It is factually true that those things that you say, the person looks good, looks this and looks that, right? It's agreeable to them. But because it's unbeneficial, the Buddha says, don't say it either. He also won't say it. Right? So it's true in this situation, if he knows the person will be led to think that these things are important, he will just seal his mouth and say, forget it, don't say. Because it doesn't cause any good out of it. So, yeah, he's okay, everything is good there, but it doesn't make a difference whether you say it or not, so don't say it. Okay, then the sixth scenario, the Buddha says, if he knows it's factually true, beneficial, and endearing, and agreeable. Okay, this one is a no-brainer, right? So obviously you can say it. But interestingly, the Buddha said it doesn't mean that you say it all the time or any time. Also got time and place, right? When the situation is correct, you say it. So in this situation, in this particular part of the thing, I don't even need to explain. I think it's quite easy to understand, his logic behind all this. Like all things else, I think in the common day language, we always say there's always a right time and right place to say things, right? Even though it's real, it's correct, and all that, there's always a right time and place, right? So this is interesting that the Buddha, even so long ago, actually said the same thing. But he has broken it down into, these various scenarios, right? As I was going through this sutta itself, it took me a while to try to figure out why some of the things like, is like examples, that whether it will fit into these things. But he's actually quite correct, right? All these things you must agree that, all these situations that he has pointed out to us. And if you keep this in mind, we know when to say it and when not to say it, right? And it also helps us to sort of like examine our own intentions sometimes and to stop ourselves from being overly spontaneous about, advice, right? Which may be well-intentioned, endearing, and agreeable, but may not be beneficial. So we always have to think the consequences of what we say, right? And and how we say it. So after he has said all this, of course, I think the prince was actually fairly satisfied, but he was also a bit surprised. So he basically asked the Buddha, "Hey, I asked you questions like this. You already plan answers or what? You know, right? Or you just on the spot, you think on your feet, okay? So the long and short of it, the Buddha says that, well, actually the Buddha thinks on his feet. You tell him the thing and, he gives you the answer on the spot according to the situation, all right? Because he wouldn't have known, right, that this guy is going to ask you so many questions on this thing. And as you can see from other suttas that the Buddha has taught, I'm quite sure you all would have noticed also, a lot of the questions may be one, but when the Buddha actually answers, he would have analyzed it into parts, and he will give it into various permutations and combinations, all right? That means it will be a plus, plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus, minus, plus, then, and all the other combinations that you can ever imagine. Sometimes I'm just amazed at the number of combinations he can come with, And in most situations, he will even explain and give examples of those combination of factors, all right? So I think a few things to learn from the sutta other than when to say things and when not to say things, all right? I think another thing to learn from suttas like this is that even when it comes to other things in our lives, right? One is that the Buddha says, there's always a time and place, there's always a context where it's sometimes yes and sometimes no. So Buddhism is not absolute like a lot of other religions where it's absolute, it's either yes or no. It's either wrong or right. So Buddha always says that you need to analyze the situation. And in every situation, there are various possible combinations that make up that situation or the question. And depending on that, you answer according to that. Right? Or your decision has to be made according to the situation and not just, I said so one black, I said so one white, because I always answer this way or I always answer that way. All right? So you can see from this teaching and a lot of other Buddhist teachings of the Buddha's analytical method of teaching, and also how the analytical method of his thinking that he encourages his disciples to sort of adopt in dealing with various questions in life. Now, personally, of course, this way of thinking and all that applies to me. As a practicing doctor, there are many situations where we are asked questions and we are supposed to give answers. And so do we give this answer or do we give that answer? You ask me the question, will my loved one die? Will not die? Right? Sometimes I know, sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I know, but should I say it like that? Should I say it now or should I say it later? All right? If I want to say it later, how do I say it later? How do I delay answering that question? And what's my intention of delaying answering that question? And can everybody tolerate a hard tell? Or some people I have to slowly ease it in, make it sound a little bit better for a while, and then, or in other words, make it sound a little bit milder before I use the D word, all right? Going to die, all right? But in some patients, we know that they can accept it, or it's more beneficial because you know that if I say that word, the family come to acceptance, deal with all the problems quickly, right? Get things going for the patient. In other words, solve all the loose ends, right? So that the patient can go peacefully. Then, of course, I will say it directly, right? But in situations where I know that I give them that, the whole thing falls apart, right? Everybody, goes into a big frenzy and nothing comes out of it. Then I have to hold back, right? I have to hold back. Either I don't say or I delay saying it, right? So it's time and place, right? Time and place, okay? But interestingly, nowhere did the Buddha say you massage the truth. Huh? You don't massage the truth just to make it sound agreeable. As long as it's untrue and unbeneficial, don't say, full stop. Don't care whether agreeable or not agreeable. Right? Just don't do it. Okay? So this sutta actually gives us very good principles of how we do our things. Right? Not just answering questions, but I think it also applies to actions, I would say, in this sutta. Okay? Yeah, so just to summarize quickly the sutta, I said the context, of course, I said is actually sort of a debate by proxy between two religious teachers, right? So this teacher sent his student over there to go and debate with Buddha and try to catch him out, right? But in the end, Buddha taught him something, And then he realized that, wow, actually Buddha's logic very good. You know, okay, I white flag, I defect to his camp. So that was what happened. And then because of that, you know, this teaching came about and gave us the opportunity to look into how the Buddha would analyze a situation like that, right, with respect to speech, right? Because you can see this sutta doesn't talk about just about doing actions per se, but as to whether he should say something or not, or would he say something or not. So we can take the same principle to apply with actions, right? Because it would, if you logically look at this, actions would actually fall in the same sort of framework. And in a situation like that, gives us a guide in a lot of gray areas in life where we would like to have sometimes very nice, clear-cut, black and white answers, but they make no sense at all right? So, and if we want, and people sometimes challenge you on these black and white things, and or they try to make it black and white when it's actually a gray, right? What they're trying to do is to push this, this two-horn chestnut into your throat. That's what they're just trying to do, right? So be clever in this situation, learn from the Buddha, and tell them it's contextual. It depends on the situation, right? And then use your brain, analyze it, and think through it yourself. And if you're not prepared to answer it, you can always say you don't answer, because Buddha said you don't need to say anything, right? So, and once you have thought it through, figured it out, and if you think it's beneficial to give the reply, you reply. Okay, so I think this is the gist of the sutta. That's all I have to say. Thank you. You all have any questions?
Anyone would like to start with the first question?
Thank you, Doctor, for this practical sutta talk. I actually have two questions, if I may. One is regarding your opening remark. The other one is about your talk proper. You opened your talk by mentioning about religious teachers at Buddha's time coming together, and there was no reason why there is such. But I don't know whether you have heard of Carl Jung. He's a psychoanalyst scientist who says that there's such a thing as a causal event. That means it happens without any cause at all. So what's your take on this?
Honestly, don't know. Because these things all happened so many thousands of years ago. But it's just a historical thing that we know that there was a clustering of a lot of great thinkers, right, across the world around that period. So historically, it was a very productive philosophical period in time, yeah, for religion and philosophy. Yeah, I was just joking and saying that, maybe there were a group of friends who, some other planet somewhere that all died around the same time, and then we born and scattered around Earth.
What is your take on a causal event? A causal event, that means things happening without a cause. What is your take on that?
Okay. From a Buddhist standpoint, of course, we always say that, everything comes from a cause, right? Yeah, but I think we have to understand that from our idea of a cause, sometimes we always think in terms of because of A, then you have B lah. But also in Buddhism, you also understand multi-causality, right? So not everything in B is only due to A. It's usually A is maybe a 75% shareholder, but there's a 25% that is split up again among another 10,000 people or 10,000 things, right? So if you want to say that A causality, it just happened to be, from a Buddhist standpoint, I don't think that is something that Buddhists in general accept, right? But at the same time, also Buddhists also do not accept, as I said, single causation, right? On the third point is that it's very often difficult for us to sometimes even pinpoint, the number of causes of a situation. So if it's too complex, sometimes we think there are no causes, right? And because we think there are no causes, although the human mind always tries to seek one, and that's why a lot of religions have come about. We always try to attribute something to a cause. But when you are pushed to the limit, you say that no cause, right? So like, for example, you say, okay, everything must have a cause, everything must have a cause. How can the world be like that? How can the world be like that? Right? Therefore, there must be a God. But then I ask you, what's the cause of God? Oh, God got no cause, right? So you see the problem with this thing? Because this type of thing is either you have an infinite regression that goes back endlessly, or you have a situation where you put an arbitrary stop to things and say that, there's no cause. Yeah? But I think it is more, probably more honest to say that, rather to say that, I don't know. I really don't know, right? And in Buddhism itself, I think the Buddha didn't want to answer the question, right? Is it because he don't know? Well, he didn't say. That's all I can say, he didn't say, right? But at the same time, the only thing that he did say is that it's a waste of time trying to go so far back. It makes no difference to your current situation, right? Although, from a scientific point of view, we always try to understand what the cause of the universe and all that. But I think everybody deep inside them know that you will never find the end of it. Right? We try. But in the trying, we learn a lot of other things, you see? But it doesn't mean that we will ever find it. There's a point where it will just go round and round in circles and we don't understand where it is. It's like trying to say that after you draw a circle, so where's the beginning of the circle? So because I can't find the beginning of the circle, the circle has got no cause, right? That seems to suggest that, right? There's no cause because there's no beginning. So where? I don't know. See? So some of these things are logical, sort of a paradox that you really cannot solve anyway, and it doesn't really lead to much, yeah. So I think all these viewpoints, they're just what they are, that's all. Yeah.
The second question is about this saying things that are not true. Ajahn Brahm, sorry I bring up Ajahn Brahm, he seems to support that flattery works and can be used for purpose. Okay, I'll give you an example. If I want my boss to sign something, right, and I know that he will not sign it in his mood, but it is good for the company, so I go and tell him a flattery thing that makes him good, and then he signs it. So the outcome is good, but it's not the truth. So in that case, is it part of that sutta thing?
I think then it boils down to being skillful or not, huh? Okay, because you can say things that are agreeable and true and beneficial.
It's not true in this case because
I'm not so sure I agree with that then. Okay, then I would say that I'm not sure whether that would really satisfy what the teaching says here. Because I think in almost every situation, even if you want to sweeten the ground, right, saying nice things, which you normally don't say, right, you can always choose the nice things that are true, right, and the nice things that will sort of like put the person in the positive mindset so that they will respond appropriately, right, okay? And the ability to find what is the right things to do at that point in time without breaching this principle, that is really basically requires a fair bit of wisdom, correct? Fair bit of wisdom and a bit more effort than to pick a simple flattery to flatter the person and then move on, you see? No, it's like, there are many ways to make a cake taste good, right? Of course, you can put lots of sugar, but it doesn't mean it will taste good at the end of the day, right? It's more the balance of things that you think, the thought that goes into it, and how much is just right to achieve the end point, you see? But it takes so much work to make a nice cake. It's so much easier to put a lot of sugar, you see? So I think that would be what I feel that, would be more in line with the teachings here, yeah? I'm not sure whether Ajahn Brahm really meant it that way.
Yeah, he mentioned use flattery.
Yes, any other question?
Thank you, Doctor, for your talk. This question actually follows on from that. I was pondering through the talk about where we understand things like white lies. I think that's similar to the concept that you raised. White lie is something perhaps that isn't true, but it can be beneficial. It may be flattering, and if it's an answer like, when you're asked, "Do I look good in this dress?" And you say yes, it might stop you from getting slapped if you say no. So there's some simple white lies that we use that I don't think we generally feel are bad in themselves because of their outcome, but if we do reflect on the truth of them, they're probably something we shouldn't say, and yet we do it every day quite often.
I think this is where I think, okay, personally, of course, I still think that it's ideal not to lie at all, whether white or otherwise, right? And I always feel that, not being able to get the same effect or the message across without having to lie requires a lot of work. Okay, a lot more thinking, a lot more understanding of people, understanding of yourself, your intentions, and all that. White lies are sometimes very efficient, all right? Because they are quick and easy, You just throw it off and it happens, right? You don't see the consequences. And you think that consequences are good on the person. But I think the point that we have to be careful about is that the effect it has on ourselves. Okay? Because we know it's a lie. Right? We intentionally lie. So what is the mental process behind that? You see? Right? It may be proper, it may have been started off by a good intention, right? It may have been something that you hope to achieve a good effect because you think that, you will lessen somebody's suffering or will benefit that person, whatever, it is, right? Yeah. But, after you tell a lot of white lies and you keep telling white lies, it becomes habitual in your mind that that deception is all not so bad, right? So there's a higher risk of your mind slipping into it in the situation where it's no longer white, or when it becomes gray, Then you say, maybe not so bad, like it's okay also, Let's go ahead, right? So I think Buddhism is interesting because very often in most religions it's all about, this A is right, B is wrong, and that's all there is to it, right? But in Buddhism, I think there's a lot more about, as I said, situations. There's also a lot more about the effects on others and yourself. Because in Buddhism, a lot of the practice is internal. What you do to outside people, even though it may harm somebody, strictly speaking, it is just part of your practice. It is not the effect on the other person that really counts. When you harm somebody else out external, okay, say that whoever the person is in front of you, it is not just because the person gets hurt, the person gets killed or whatever, but it's a mind state that you generate within yourself as a Buddhist that propagates a certain negative trait in you, right? That you are trying desperately as a Buddhist to put under control, right? And the danger of all these things is that when it becomes habitual, it becomes less and less easy to catch, you see? It will slip through, all right? And sometimes it will start with external things, and then it will start with internal things, and then it will start with yourself. A little bit of self-deception here is okay lah. No lah, it's okay lah. I have my blood sugar is not very good lah. No lah, it's okay lah, I think it's fine, right? It's fine. Because you're just trying to deceive yourself because you don't want to face it, right? Because if you face it, I cannot enjoy my life. I cannot have my, I cannot have my cupcake. I can't have my, whatever, right? My ice cream or whatever. You see? So you say, yeah. But it's true to some extent. It's not a big thing. If you eat ice cream today, if you got sugar's a bit high, 3 days of ice cream is not going to kill you, right? But over a prolonged period, as you avoid the issue, you run away from the issue, you form a mental habit of trying to run away, not face, right? I know sometimes it's just very difficult, and Buddhism being what it is, again, it's not a religion where somebody judges you, right? So we are our own judges in a sense. We decide, and it is because of the effect it has on our own minds that we have to deal with. So when we tell a white lie, even though of good intention and all that, we have to guard very carefully what happens in our own head, that this doesn't become a habit. So the Buddha doesn't say that you tell a white lie and then, oh, okay, you go to hell. Sorry, you go to hell. No, it doesn't happen like that, right? But you know that deep inside, it wasn't true. You know it, right? So it affects your mental state. It affects your mental training, right? So over a period of time, it erodes your training. Yeah. So that is the danger that we have to be aware. In fact, in Buddhism, every action that we do is like that. Beneficial to others, beneficial to yourself. The best action beneficial to all parties, right? The not so good action is beneficial to others but not to yourself, right? Or beneficial to yourself but don't harm others. But as I say, it's all about win-win. So the best is the win-win. Yeah. And no, as I said, nobody judges you, but unfortunately, the internal impact will happen and you face it yourself. So even though there are a lot of situations, even like for us as medical professionals, we have to deal with, which I like to bring up very often, like say an abortion, all right? We say, oh, we cannot take life, so we don't want to do abortion, just say, okay? So we send the patient off and we say, but the patient said, I really cannot, you know, if I have this kid's going to starve, all right? So what am I going to do? Of course, the best part is preventive, lah, you know? Don't get pregnant, so you educate them, provide them with birth control, etc., etc. But it's already failed, okay? So you have to be practical, right? Something has to be done. Or the kid is, say, for example, malformed for some reason, some genetic disease. You know that the parents just don't have the means to do it, right? And they have decided that this is no choice, it hurts them, but they have to do it. And you as a professional say, no, I'm not going to do it for you. So you drive them to a back lane abortionist, and then the patient gets infection and dies, right? So save your own karma. So were you compassionate or not, right? But that if you do it, you kill somebody, right? You kill something. So you just have to wait. And this is where sometimes I think maybe we draw on a little bit on on the Bodhisattva ideal, maybe, perhaps, to say that sometimes you have to sacrifice your own karma a little bit in a situation when it's needed, right? Of course, some of my friends say, no, let another doctor do it, okay? But if you are a Buddhist, you say, I let my friend who doesn't understand this do it, he still faces the same karma. So I'm basically sending somebody to the firing squad, right? Am I being compassionate? Questionable, right? Questionable, right? Right? So I always say to my colleagues and my junior, you take a decision for yourself, but just let me remind you, you push it to somebody else, I'm not so sure the karma is any better than if you were to take it on yourself, knowing the consequences of the karma, okay? So sometimes we just say, just take it on to yourself, all right? You know that it is not ideal, but it has to be done, so you just do it. Right? It's not that you go around just rampantly aborting everybody, right? Or you just carry out an abortion without counseling, without trying to see whether there are other avenues that you can prevent it from happening, right? So I think all that things should be tried first. And if it's been tried, exhausted, and you find that the pros and cons is, really against keeping the baby, for example, in this situation, for whatever the reasons are, right? And you are obviously not going to stick your neck out and say, I'll fund the baby for the rest of his life, right? So literally, you are not left with the baby. So shut up, okay? Make your decision, shut up, and if you are compassionate enough, stick your neck out. If not, then forget it. Nobody's going to judge you for it, right? But don't go and judge somebody else who's doing it and say that the person is being uncompassionate, right? Because you are no different. Okay, so I think this is where I think in Buddhism again it's very situational, and we all have to know that we are faced with a lot of difficult situations where you do you're damned, you don't do also you're damned, So sometimes we just have to decide for yourself your risk appetite, and whether you want to stick your neck out or not, and it is fair either way, whether you choose to or you don't, right? Yeah, because each of us have a different level of training, each of us have a different level of ability to accept the consequences, right? But on the whole, I always advise my own friends and juniors is that if you're Buddhist, I say at least as a Buddhist, you know the consequences of karma, so you can make sure that you accumulate a lot more good karma and good merit, right? So you can actually dampen the effects of all these things. And you know that you can control your intentions. In other words, when you are doing a procedure like that, which is unwholesome, you know that you are doing it out of a motivation of kindness and compassion, rather than somebody who looks at it as a job to earn money only. All right? So you have an advantage of that knowledge to help to sort of lessen or mild down the effect, which your other colleagues may not have. So take it as a plus point, in your considerations.
Any other question? Just one more question.
Maybe just one view from Dr. Tan. Can you hear me? Yeah, there was a scenario in the book Les Miserables, which I heard that it was originally from a Zen Buddhist text, by the way. There was a scene where the abbot actually told a deliberate lie because his compassion was much greater than his sense of telling the truth. So his intent was to help the convict, give him a chance to find a life. So he actually told a deliberate lie. And then if you're a reader of the book, you will know that the person, the convict, was so touched by that bishop's deliberate lie that it actually impacted him so much, it changed him to become a good man. I'm not sure you're familiar with that scene. So here the sense of compassion is much greater than the sense of telling the truth. And it's probably, so it seems to help. It seems to be very beneficial. So what would be your view on this? By the way, I heard it's from the Zen Buddhist text, long before the French.
Yeah, because if you say it's from that, I'm not surprised. Because as I said just now, right, if you take an action that is based on the Bodhisattva ideal of sacrificing your own welfare, right, which is your, by doing taking on some bad karma or the effects of bad karma for the better, for the improvement or happiness of somebody else, right? But this is doing good in a bad situation. In a bad situation. Yeah, I think that is fine. As I said, from a Buddhist standpoint, you do it knowing what you're doing is not right, knowing that this is exception, not the rule, right? That this has its consequences, right? But the overwhelming intention is I will bear the consequences, right? For the sake of all beings. So it's actually based on that idea. Yeah. So I think if as long as you can be certain that you're telling white lies for that kind of reason, I doubt so for the day-to-day things. Very often this is nowhere near that at all. It's for social and business expediency only, right? So if it's for such altruistic reasons and you can actually bring somebody to your sort of like not say to your side, but to learn something, and the person really, say for example, in this case, becomes a better person, right? You can see the karmic effect. It's almost negated. Correct? It's almost negated. But it doesn't still, it still doesn't remove it all, right? I think also there are other stories about this, the Bodhisattva on the is it in a boat or something like that, with the murderer who goes around killing people. And then, if he doesn't kill the guy, everybody's going to get killed, so he decides to kill the guy, right? So that's another example of where, in a bad situation, you sometimes have to stick your neck out, stick your karma out for grabs, and then you just let it happen. But in most of things in life, in our mundane life, it's not like that. So we just have to guard against it, that's all. Yeah.
Maybe we have time for just one last question. Any last burning question?
Hi, Doctor. What about situations where the truth is based on interpretation from different sides? You can have data, but just like economists, right? I mean, the same data can represent a rosy forecast or a negative forecast. And what about the so-called the liberals and the conservatives? Look at Trump and look at Obama. Both believe that they're telling the truth because based on their own interpretation, and they believe that it's for the benefit of the followers. So, in this context, what do you think would be if Buddha was still around? What would his advice be to all these politicians and even to our own recently the IPS, the Institute of Policy Studies, where Dr. Tommy Koh and the DPM was talking, right? And each seems to disagree with each other because they say, because from the positions of different interpretation, right? He representing the government, the other representing the maybe more grassroots and a more, shall we say, less biased view. Even Tommy Koh brought up the difference between reporting by the Straits Times and his own quotations not being mentioned, right? So, I mean, it's just academic, but anyways, since you're talking about all this truth and the benefits, but sometimes they are not so clear-cut.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is definitely true. But if you actually look at the sutta again carefully, it's usually talking about benefit and all that and leading towards the goal. So from a Buddhist standpoint, it is about spiritual practice, right? Not about these mundane things. I think mundane things, there is always going to be different views. And the views will be based on basically the framework that you adopt, right? Whether it's economics or medicine and all that, there are always different theories behind, for example, the causation of certain situations and the outcomes of certain situations due to different models that you use, right? And the only reason that we have all the different models, the different sort of frameworks, the different philosophies that you adopt is because we don't know any better, right? So we are using what we have as information and data to try and make sense of this world and try to predict a lot of the things that are not really predictable, right? So in that sense, I think it is not quite the same as this situation. This one, again, in the Buddhist teachings, a lot of it is meant more for what's going on internally for yourself, all right? Like, for example, in the Tomiko and this DPM debate, what's more important is that for them is to know what goes on in their own heads. Do they know it as far as they know deep in their hearts that this is true, this is beneficial, right? Then they say it as it is. That's fine from that point of view, right? But if they knowingly know that this is not true and not beneficial, then that's a different story already, right? So how it appears to us is not important, actually. It's really not important. Because we are just observing them, right? So we don't really know. And we know that all situations like this, whether it's economics or even science, we think it's very rigid and a lot of things. Actually, it's not true at all, There's so many competing theories and understandings of so many things in life, right? Science is not complete, right? So it's again, people do to the best of their understanding and knowledge what is considered factually true at that point in time. A few thousand years ago, you said that only atoms were the smallest part of, the smallest particle that we know, right? And that would be factually true, right? That nobody will go and fight with you. Nobody was trying to lie to you when they told you that. But today, if you tell them that, oh, those fellows were lying. No, they were not lying. They just didn't know. Okay? They just didn't know, right? So I think that is where we have to be careful that not to extrapolate it to situations like that, Because a lot of the Buddha's teachings really are not really geared towards this type of so-called worldly sort of viewpoints. In fact, there are many suttas that talk about views and how these views are actually there's no end to it, There's really so many variations that can happen. And he has got a whole sutta on views that basically generically breaks it down into certain sort of like parameters. And that you will see that most worldviews do fall into one of the categories. Okay, one of the categories. So like in those situations, as long as they are acting in the best interest and the best knowledge that they know with no false pretense of trying to steer it one way or the other for a good intention or bad intention, whatever it is, then they would be fine and within this teaching. All right? Even though both of them do not agree. Because whether they agree or not is not dependent on it's not totally dependent on the facts of the truth of the matter because it is unknown, right? But so therefore it will be dependent on the next level of things, whether it is beneficial or endearing, whether it sounds beneficial, whether it sounds agreeable, or does it the aim is to hurt people or whatever, And from a spiritual level for them, at the end of the day, it comes to the intention. Why did they say it? What are they working towards? Both of them may be working towards a goal to better our people, just say, right? Better the lives of Singaporeans, you see? But they may have different ideas how it should be done. This is so common. And sometimes we are the better for it. Because if only one person thinks that he knows the answer to it all, in the mundane world, and we have no alternative views, then sometimes we have limited our own choices. We have limited our own potential, right, to explore different avenues which we are blind to. What we don't see, we don't know, lah, right? And what we don't know, we cannot apply, right? So that's how I would look at it. Yeah.
So let's say sadhu 3 times. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.